The Lexington air always felt thicker to me, not because of the weather, but because of the weight it carried. I parked by the curb, engine humming softly as I stared at the modest two-story house that had somehow grown smaller in my absence. There was a sign staked into the yard that read, "Welcome Family, Thanksgiving 2025, in cheerful script. Beneath it, a list of names. Mine wasn't there. I took a breath, resting both hands on the steering wheel. "Just one dinner," I whispered. "Smile. Don't let it get to you." The trunk clicked open behind me. I grabbed the cranberry tart I had baked at 2 a.m. after flying all night from Portland. No one asked me to bring anything. No one ever did. But I did anyway, out of habit. Or hope. I still can't tell which. As I stepped up the front porch, I caught the scent of cinnamon and turkey escaping through the slightly ajar door. It was the same aroma that used to make me feel safe as a child. But now, it barely touched me. I hadn't been here in 3 years. Too many missed calls, too many empty, maybe next year replies. And yet, here I was, standing in front of a door that never opened for me first. Inside, laughter echoed from the dining room. I slipped off my shoes, placed the tart on the counter, and walked in just as Soraya turned and blinked. "Oh," she said. "You made it." No hug, just a look that said, "We weren't expecting you, but now we have to deal with it." The dining table looked like something out of a Southern living spread. Ivory napkins folded into swans, gold-rimmed plates, candles flickering low, name cards neatly printed at every seat, except mine. I scanned the table. Every seat was taken, or reserved. I looked to Soraya, who followed my gaze, then gestured casually toward the far end of the room. "There's a spot at the kids' table," she said, as if she hadn't just punched me in the chest with those words. I glanced at the small folding table, nestled against the hallway wall, dangerously close to the bathroom. Plastic cups, paper plates. A few tweens with iPads already sat there, oblivious. "It's just for tonight," she added. Callista, my sister, always picture-perfect, tilted her head and gave me that fake, sympathetic smile. "Oops," she said with a light laugh. "Must have been a mix-up. You know how Mom gets with seating." It wasn't a mix-up. It never is. It's a message, wrapped in etiquette and wrapped again in plausible deniability. I smiled politely, walked over, and took my place beside a boy who didn't even look up from his game. The clink of glasses and forks filled the air. Conversations bubbled around me, none directed toward me. "Is that a new car, Callista?" Aunt Marianne's voice rang out. Callista leaned back proudly. "Yes, Tesla Model Y, midnight silver." "Fancy," someone said. Another added, "You've earned it, girl." I blinked. The down payment for that car had come from my account, an emergency transfer when Callista said she'd lose her apartment if I didn't help. "Just this once," she'd said. "Just until next quarter." I bit into a roll. It was dry, or maybe that was just the taste of resentment coating everything tonight. Soraya floated between conversations like a seasoned hostess, full of smiles for everyone but me. I asked Uncle Dennis how retirement was treating him. "Oh, good, good," he replied vaguely before turning back to his phone. I offered to refill Aunt Cheryl's wine. "I'm good," she said, barely looking up. I excused myself, not because I needed the restroom, but because sitting one more second in that chair would have cracked me. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. On the wall, new photo frames caught my eye, one in particular, a large matted portrait with gilded corners. Thanksgiving last year. Everyone around the table, raising glasses. Callista in the center, Soraya mid-laugh, relatives smiling. I remembered being there. I stood right next to Callista in that photo, but in the frame, I was gone. Cropped, neatly erased like I'd never existed in that moment. My stomach dropped, not even blurred, just omitted. A voice behind me said, "Oh yeah, I think that photo looks cleaner this way." It was my cousin Leo, sipping soda like he hadn't just confirmed I was intentionally deleted from family history. I didn't answer him. I didn't trust my voice. Back at the kids' table, my food had gone cold. I didn't touch it. The cranberry tart sat untouched on the kitchen island, while everyone devoured Callista's store-bought pumpkin pie like it was made by angels. I watched the people I used to know, still playing their parts like nothing had changed. They laughed, passed dishes, reminisced about holidays past, holidays I had helped fund, often without credit. When Dad lost his job in 2010, I covered the mortgage for 6 months. When Callista couldn't pay tuition, I paid off her balance. When Mom needed a new roof, I wired the money. No strings, no announcements, just family. But now, I wasn't just unwanted, I was invisible. Not angry, not yet, just done. Home isn't where they love you, it's where they remember you, I muttered to no one. The clinking of a glass snapped everyone's attention to Soraya, who stood at the head of the main table, her wine raised high. "Can I have everyone's attention?" she called out. I sat straighter, instinctively bracing myself. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Callista adjusted her blouse, smoothed her hair, and smiled at me like she already knew the punchline. "And now," Soraya beamed, "a toast to the daughter I'm most proud of." She turned to Callista. My heart didn't sink. It stopped altogether. Soraya raised her glass high, her voice carrying over the clinking of silverware and murmurs of wine-soaked conversation. "To my pride and joy," she said with deliberate pause, her eyes glinting with self-satisfaction. "Ondine, she's proof that hard work, class, and family loyalty always win." Every syllable hit with surgical precision. The guests nodded, many smiling, some clapping softly. I watched from the folding chair at the kids' table, plastic fork resting against untouched stuffing. Ondine gave the room her best demure nod, her wineglass tilted at just the right angle. She held my gaze for a split second, not in triumph, but in dominance. She knew. She always knew. That look said, "I've won again, and you'll swallow it with a smile." Class and loyalty. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 3 weeks ago, Ondine had begged me for another $3,000. "Just until this new brand deal kicks in," she'd said. "You know how seasonal revenue works." I wired the money without response. As always, no thank you, no mention, just silence, until now, when she basked in a glow built from a bank account that wasn't hers. You can't rewrite family history when the ink is still wet, I thought, but clearly they were trying. As the toast ended, Soraya called out, "Let's eat dessert. I hope everyone saved room for the pumpkin pie. Ondine made it herself, from Grandma's original recipe." A few people let out polite oh-ho's. Someone actually clapped. I stayed in my seat. Ondine waved modestly. "It's nothing, really. I just wanted to keep Grandma's spirit alive in some small way." Soraya took the pie dish from the counter and began slicing ceremoniously. "She's the only one who kept our traditions going," she added. I blinked. Hard. That recipe. The handwritten card, yellowed and creased, was in my kitchen drawer in Oregon. I'd stood next to Grandma every summer for 6 years, learning each measurement, each brushstroke of egg wash. Ondine hadn't lifted a spatula until her mid-20s, and even then, she called me for help baking boxed cornbread. Still, I watched as Soraya placed a slice in front of Ondine, like it was an heirloom. "They like stories more than they like truth," I whispered under my breath. I traced the edge of my plate with my thumb, imagining the cool marble countertop back home, the smell of nutmeg, the Sunday calls Grandma used to make just to check on my crust. Those memories weren't performance pieces. They were mine, lived and earned. People will ignore what you do, I thought again, but never what they can spin you into. Then came the clink of another glass. Uncle Ray this time, with flushed cheeks and half-lidded eyes. "To the wine!" he bellowed. "Best bottle of Sonoma Red I've had all year. Thanks, Ondine." "You're too generous, girl." The table laughed and nodded in agreement. Ondine gave a soft shrug. "Anything for family," she said sweetly. I leaned forward slightly. "Actually," I said, my voice even, not loud but precise, "I ordered that case, had it shipped here last week." The room stilled, not dramatically, but like the space had shifted a few degrees. Soraya cleared her throat. "You don't need to say that," she said quickly, smiling tight. "It's not a competition." Ondine tilted her head. never missing a beat. Sometimes she forgets she doesn't need to prove herself here. The comment floated like incense, sweet and suffocating. A few people chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to nod or change the subject. I gave a small smile and looked away, not because I was defeated, but because I was calculating. The truth no longer mattered in this room. Not really. The narrative had already been curated, rehearsed, and served warm with whipped cream. And no one wanted to return it. I studied the way Soraya played hostess, graceful with others, curt with me. She never outright dismissed me, but her tone always bent just enough to draw lines, always nudging, never nurturing. Ondine had mastered weaponized humility. She wore false modesty like a tailored coat, just enough self-deprecation to seem humble, but never enough to forfeit credit. Even her silence after Uncle Ray's toast felt choreographed, like she knew she was stealing a spotlight I had paid for, and believed it was hers by default. It's not lies they tell, I thought, it's truths they bury. And I wasn't going to be the one shoveling anymore. I picked up my phone from the table, opened my notes app, and typed one line. Stop funding family stories that delete you. I hit save. No one noticed. Ondine stood up to help clear the table. She picked up plates with practiced ease, smiling as she moved from guest to guest. I watched her carefully, not with bitterness, but with precision. She thinks the plate she carries is heavy, I thought. Wait until she sees what I've been holding. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I just watched. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't a dinner anymore. It was a reckoning. Dinner plates had been cleared. The smell of sweet potatoes and burnt marshmallows still lingered, clinging to the air like an old argument no one dared unpack. Most of the adults drifted into small conversation clusters, half-finished wine glasses in hand, stories that had been told a dozen times already spilling out again like clockwork. I tried to blend in, or rather, not stick out. Aunt Marla made her way toward me with a familiar grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. There she is, she sang. Our little tech girl, still doing that computer thing from home? That tone. It always started like honey, ended like vinegar. I smiled politely, even though my stomach tightened. Yes, still running Mountain Peak. We had our best quarter last fall. Marla nodded slowly, clearly not absorbing a word. Well, isn't that something? So you're not doing, like, real estate or teaching? No, I said, still gentle. E-commerce. Direct-to-consumer gear and brand licensing now. Right, she said quickly, eyes already drifting toward the tray of cookies on the sideboard. Well, Callista's been working so hard. She's got such presence, don't you think? That was always the pivot. Change the subject before giving space for an answer that might upend the narrative. Because the truth wasn't what they came for. They came for stories that confirmed what they already decided. And me, I was never part of their version of the story. If they can't dismiss you, I thought, they'll distort you. I took a step back toward the corner of the room, pretending to admire Soraya's new floral wallpaper, when I heard Ondine, Callista, clear her throat. She was seated at the main table again, dessert now served, and she had everyone's attention like it was rehearsed. I have to tell this one, she began with a laugh, eyes already scanning the room for impact. Remember when Amora first tried to start her business? She was so clueless about tech, bless her heart. I had to teach her how to build a website. We stayed up until 2 a.m., trying to make the header fit. Laughter echoed, like wind passing through empty wine glasses. Even Soraya chuckled. She was always the creative one, she added, but Lord knows she needed help executing. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stared at the gold-tipped candle burning near the centerpiece. 6 weeks. That's how long I worked to build my first e-commerce site. Every night, after working 2 freelance jobs to keep my apartment, I sat with YouTube tutorials, Google spreadsheets, supplier databases, and a frozen shoulder from hunching over my laptop. Callista? She showed up twice. Once to ask if she could use my printer, the other to drop off my own coffee she billed to my account. She never offered help. She offered commentary. And now, she offered herself as the co-author of something I had bled to build. I didn't correct her. Because what's the point of correcting a room that decided its own plot? In their mouths, I thought, my triumph is just a team project where I was never the leader. Soraya laughed again. You should have seen her first logo. Looked like it was made in Microsoft Paint. More laughter. I didn't bother pretending to laugh. I looked down at my plate, slowly cutting into the pie someone else claimed as hers. When your story makes others uncomfortable, I thought, they'll write it without you. The fork clinked against porcelain. Then, a light tap on my shoulder. I turned. Jordan, 19. Soraya's step-granddaughter from a second marriage no one liked talking about. She motioned with her head toward the hallway. Come here a sec? I followed her past the dining room, toward the laundry nook where the Wi-Fi signal was strongest. I hope this isn't weird, she began, glancing around. But I follow Mountain Peak on TikTok. I knew that was yours. I blinked. She fumbled with her phone, pulling up a video of our latest gear haul and live QA from a mountaineering event in Utah. I bought that headlamp, she said. It's amazing. My roommate borrowed it last week and won't give it back. I laughed. It slipped out, natural and small. I think it's so cool what you built, she continued. I wish Grandma could have seen it. I mean, your grandma. That one hit like soft thunder. My throat closed, just a little. Thanks, I managed, clearing it. Just so you know, Jordan added, I don't buy what they're selling in there. She meant the room, the performance, the rewrites. For the first time all night, I felt seen. Back in my seat, I watched the show resume. Soraya refilled someone's glass. Callista posed with the pie. The laughter came back, like nothing had happened. But to me, the entire table had shifted. The room looked like a set now. Actors hitting marks, dialogue on cue, props placed for framing. And I was the ghost they kept forgetting they buried. You can't audition for a role in a family that's already decided you're the ghost, I thought. I reached into my bag, unlocked my phone, and opened a folder labeled Receipts. Inside, screenshots, emails, wire transfers, archived LinkedIn posts, PDFs of award submissions. A draft email to Soraya sat unsent, dated 6 months ago. I've kept quiet for your comfort, but silence has a price, and I'm done footing the bill. I didn't hit send, not yet, but I wasn't deleting it either. If the truth makes them uncomfortable, good. I'm done making my story easier to digest. After dessert, Soraya tapped her glass again, a little firmer this time, calling the room back to order. Before we all drift into pie comas, she said with a laugh, I thought it'd be nice to go around and say what we're thankful for. Family, friends, second chances. Everyone quieted like schoolchildren at assembly. I stayed still at the end of the folding table, where the lukewarm pie on my plate had started to crust over. One by one, they took turns, passing gratitude around like a spotlight. I'm thankful for Mom, Callista started, brushing a hand against Soraya's shoulder, for teaching me how to be strong, gracious, and how to hold family together when it counts. Murmurs of approval followed. Soraya smiled, modest but satisfied, like a queen receiving tribute. Uncle Marty chimed in, I'm thankful for this roof, this food, and the women who made it happen. Then Aunt Liz, I'm grateful that we always come together, no matter what. It continued. Polished lines. Familiar faces, familiar roles. Nobody mentioned me. It wasn't even a surprise at this point. The omission didn't sting anymore. It just confirmed what I already knew. I'd become the invisible supporting beam no one notices until they lean too hard and it breaks. Ondine raised her glass next. I'm thankful for family that shows up. Not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of people who remind you who you are, just by being there. Her eyes found mine. A pause. A smile that was all veneer. I kept my hands folded in my lap. They didn't just forget me. They erased me because my presence didn't fit the myth they built for themselves. It wasn't just that I wasn't celebrated, I thought. I was proof that they could ignore grace if it didn't come with applause. Then came the dagger, Soraya's voice slicing through the calm. Not everyone's cut from the same cloth, she said, swirling her wine. Some of us have the blood of winners. The room burst into laughter like it was an inside joke. A cousin leaned across the table and whispered, not so softly, well, we know who she's talking about. I scanned the table. No one corrected him. No one said my name. The sound faded around me as an old memory surfaced. I was 12, standing outside in the parking lot after the regional spelling bee. I'd placed second, missed one word. Mom had left during the ceremony to drive Callista to ballet. I stood there alone with my ribbon in hand, watching other parents hug their kids. When we got home, Soraya told me, "Second place is nice, but your sister's performance had real grace." This table isn't just where we eat, I thought now. It's where they serve judgment as tradition. I stood up, carefully took my glass, and walked to the kitchen. The room barely noticed. I poured myself a splash more wine, not because I needed it, but because I wanted the motion, something to keep my hands busy while I steadied myself. I stayed there a moment too long, looking out the window, watching shadows stretch across the lawn. Then I turned to head back, and caught a glimpse of Ondine, sitting on the couch, phone in hand, angling it toward the table for a selfie. I didn't think much of it, until Jordan, the only person who'd treated me like I existed all night, walked over. "Did you see the photo she just posted?" I frowned. "What photo?" She showed me her phone screen. Instagram. A family shot taken from just moments ago. Soraya, Aunt Liz, Uncle Marty, Callista. The caption read, "Thankful for the ones who lift us higher. #gratitude. Family." I looked closer. The photo was angled just right, so that I was cut out completely. Again. Jordan hesitated. "You're not in this. Weird. I thought you were sitting next to Aunt Cheryl." "I was," I said quietly. Callista, Ondine, looked up from her phone then, met my eyes, smirked. "Must have been the lighting," she said. Then she turned back to whatever fake compliment someone was feeding her in the comments. I didn't respond. I just took out my own phone, screenshotted the post, and saved it. Not out of anger, out of discipline. They've mistaken my silence for absence, I thought. That ends tonight. I sat back at the kids' table with a calm face, smiled. But beneath it, everything had shifted. I opened the Notes app and titled a blank page, "What They Forgot, I Know." Then I started typing. Not long after, Soraya walked by. She didn't sit, just paused near my shoulder and said low enough that only I could hear, "You don't have to take everything so personally." I looked up. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Then stop making it personal." Her breath caught. She didn't reply, just blinked like I'd spoken a language she didn't expect me to know. And then she walked away. That was enough for me. I didn't need theatrics. I didn't need yelling. What I needed was a line, and tonight I finally drew one. Across the room, Ondine was still laughing, recounting some story that probably wasn't hers. People leaned in. They always leaned in when it was her. They never noticed the empty chair I'd left behind. I watched for a moment, then whispered under my breath, "You'll know soon enough what I've been holding back." That was the first time I let myself imagine a dinner without pretending I was family. The buzz started with the glossy magazine Soraya passed down the table like a crown jewel. She held it like it had weight, like it carried the legacy of our entire family in 80 pages of strategic photos and curated quotes. The cover read, "Women in Leadership, Southern Edition," with a full-page photo of Ondine posed in front of a rustic barn, arms crossed, wind catching just the right amount of hair. "I didn't even know they were doing a feature on me," Ondine said with mock surprise, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "I guess they saw my LinkedIn or something." Around the table, the response was immediate. Claps, nods, and a couple of loud wows. Aunt Liz leaned in. "That's big, sweetheart. You're becoming the face of modern success." I didn't speak. My stomach twisted. Not from jealousy, but from the knowing. I had funded that article. 3 months ago, I received a grant proposal from a marketing firm I often supported through Artemis. They were asking for sponsorship to highlight emerging women leaders in regional industries, retail, media, logistics. I signed the check, not knowing one of the submissions came from someone with my last name. Ondine had submitted herself, used the foundation name, never mentioned a word. I could still see the subject line in my inbox. "Grateful for your support. Publication in print November 2025. Of course she hadn't told me. That would have required honesty and risked being told no. so she submitted it behind my back. And here she was, cashing in the applause. "That magazine," I said finally. "Wasn't it sponsored by the Artemis Fund?" Ondine's eyes flicked toward me, briefly. Then she gave a soft nod. "Maybe. I know it had corporate sponsors." I smiled, tired and sharp. "I sit on the Artemis board. We choose the honorees." A hush rolled over the table. Even Uncle Marty stopped chewing. A cousin coughed. Aunt Cheryl swirled her wine. Soraya broke the silence with the ease of someone who had dodged tougher landmines. "Well, however it happened, it's still a proud moment. It's about recognition, and we're proud of her for getting it." "No one said otherwise," I replied, tone flat. "Just clarifying how it happened." The subject changed quickly. Talk shifted to the Christmas party, then Jordan's college major. But the buzz had already turned. I could feel the shift. Some faces wouldn't meet mine. Even when they know it's built on a lie, I thought, they'll protect the one who makes it look good on camera. As I got up to stretch my legs, Aunt Cheryl followed, wine in hand. She smiled gently and leaned in, voice hushed. "I'm really glad you still came," she said. "Still?" I echoed. She blinked, then chuckled. "You know, even without the invite and all." I paused. "I got an invite." "Well, sure. I mean, the digital one," she clarified, pulling her purse strap over her shoulder. "Everyone else got these beautiful printed versions with handwritten notes. Callista and your mom signed them all." She reached into her purse and pulled one out, folded at the crease, heavy cardstock, gold trim, my name nowhere on it. "Oh," I said, blinking. It hit harder than it should have. I pulled up the email on my phone. "You're invited," it read. No personalization, no note, a generic link. Just like the ones we send to donors we're obligated to include. I wasn't even meant to be part of this, I thought. I was a formality. For the first time in a long time, I let that truth land without pushing it away. I walked down the hallway and found Soraya near the coat rack, adjusting a candle on a side table like it offended her sense of symmetry. "I know you didn't want me here," I said plainly. She didn't flinch, just paused in her movement. "You always make everything so dramatic, Amora." "No," I said, calm and centered. "You make it silent and hope I disappear. That's not happening anymore." She turned slightly, as if to respond, but nothing came out. I didn't give her time to find the words. I walked away, leaving her with the same silence she had weaponized for years. But this time, it was mine. In the living room, voices picked back up. Ondine was holding court, telling a story about some influencer she almost partnered with. I walked past the kitchen and into the hallway, tapping my phone as I moved. I opened the app, pulled up a folder labeled Q4 Grant Distribution. Inside were spreadsheets, digital signatures, and the list of sponsors. Next to Ondine's name, funded by A. Win. I stared at it. They may have scrubbed my name from invitations, photo captions, and family stories. But here, in the documentation, I still existed. My money had paid for the lie. If they won't tell the truth about who I am, I thought, then I'll make them hear it in my own language. Receipts. After the crowd had thinned and the last slice of pie had been claimed, I stepped outside the back door for a breath of air. The chill hit different. Colder than I expected, but welcome. My skin tightened, but my mind stayed sharp. I could still hear Callista's laugh trailing through the cracked kitchen window like an echo that refused to die. As I turned to re-enter the house, a young man with a tray approached quietly. He didn't look like the rest of the catering staff. No blank stare, no phone in hand. He was intentional, which made me pause. "You probably don't remember me," he started, offering a tentative smile. "Lucas, I used to work overnight shifts at your Commerce City warehouse." I blinked. The memory clicked. "You covered December fulfillment 2 years ago, had perfect attendance." He looked surprised. "You remember that?" "I remember who keeps things standing when no one's watching." He nodded slowly, then lowered his voice. "I just wanted to say thank you." "The $500 bonus last year. It helped me cover college books when I was short." I felt something tug behind my ribs, pride that had no audience. That was anonymous. Still yours, he said. I wasn't going to come tonight, saw Callista's name on the host list, and thought she owned the business now. I didn't flinch. No, she just uses the mailing address. He looked like he wanted to say more, but his eyes darted back toward the patio doors. If you ever need a reference, anything, just say the word. I smiled softly. Thank you, Lucas. Even outside this house, she's walking in shoes I bought. A few minutes later, I found myself leaning against the kitchen island. Lucas had gone back to clearing glasses. The rest of the guests were scattered around the living room, balancing wine glasses and dessert forks. Conversations buzzed in low hums, some genuine, some obligatory. Lucas passed by me again, slower this time. I applied to a marketing role Callista posted last month, he said under his breath. She never replied, said she ran logistics, but what she described didn't match what I knew. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. Let's keep this between us for now. He offered a brief nod and disappeared into the dining room. Inside, I watched her, Callista, laughing, nodding, hugging someone she barely knew. The ease with which she carried my name, my brand, like it was a weekend tote bag she could drop whenever it got too heavy. Some people borrow your identity like it's a gift shop hoodie until it no longer fits their narrative. I heard a spoon tapping against a wine glass again, this time from Soraya. She stood near the living room archway, holding something small and velvet in her hand. Before everyone heads home, she began, I wanted to share something special. Everyone turned. My pulse slowed, not with anticipation, but readiness. This bracelet belonged to my mother, she said, voice full of reverence. She passed it to me when I got married. It's meant for the daughter who keeps the family spirit alive. I knew what was coming, knew it before her feet carried her across the room. She walked right past me, no glance, no hesitation, and placed the velvet box into Callista's hands. You've earned this. There were soft gasps. Even someone whispered, Isn't Amora the youngest? Callista did her usual performative hesitation. Oh no, I couldn't, unless Mom really wants me to. My voice came out before I could filter it. Of course she does. I didn't raise it. Didn't need to. The silence did more than volume ever could. The bracelet glinted under the living room lights. Delicate, old gold, the kind that holds stories in each scratch. It had been promised to me since I was 11. I said nothing else. Just turned and walked outside again. The night had deepened. A few more stars now. My fingers trembled, not from cold but restraint. I sat on the patio steps, pulled out my phone, and opened the gallery. Scrolled back until I found it. A photo of me and Grandma in Oregon, covered in flour, holding that same bracelet while she told me, This is yours, one day. They don't just take things. They take the moments that built you and then hand them off like trophies to someone who wasn't even there. Stealing an object is a crime. Stealing a memory is a curse. My fingers moved on their own. I opened my email, typed a short note to the Artemis Fund board. Subject, Sponsorship Review, Request. Message, Please prepare to reassess the Q4 public profiles list. I'll be submitting formal documentation on one name for removal. I attached nothing, not yet. Then I opened my notes app, drafted a caption. Not every legacy is inherited. Some are hijacked. I didn't hit publish, but I saved it. When I stood to go back inside, I wasn't shaking anymore. Everything looked the same. The furniture, the lighting, the placement of empty dishes. But the way I saw it had shifted completely. The smile I wore wasn't to keep peace. It was to signal the end of my silence. They gave her a bracelet to mark a legacy. I have the proof to dismantle hers. The text came through just as I stepped into the hallway to avoid yet another round of Callista's fake laugh monologue about the struggles of entrepreneurship. A familiar number, short message, just a name I trusted, followed by one sentence. You need to hear this. Attached was a voice note. I ducked into the powder room, locked the door, slid my earbuds in, and pressed play. Yeah. The voice on the recording said, casual, boastful, Callista's voice. I told them my sister's the CEO. It got me through the pitch. You know how this works. They want assurance. They want pedigree. There was a pause, followed by laughter. Someone in the background muttered, "Smart move." Then the clip ended. I stood still, not shocked, just confirmed. She had been using my name, my title, my work, not in metaphors, in contracts, in real-time business negotiations, in places that carried weight. This wasn't storytelling or holiday bragging anymore. This was impersonation. Economic theft, reputational fraud, wrapped in sisterly entitlement. "That's all I needed," I whispered. I left the bathroom, face composed, shoulders square. No one noticed I'd been gone. For the next hour, I moved through the house like nothing had happened, refilling my own drink, making polite eye contact, nodding where necessary. But inside, I was rearranging every piece on the board. This wasn't just lying. This was impersonation with economic leverage. And they had no idea I'd just heard their queen admit to stealing the crown. For the past year, there had been small signs, vendors reaching out with confusion about projects I never approved, industry friends asking when my sister's department would launch in Denver. Even one investor who personally thanked me at a gala for trusting Callista with the expansion. I'd smiled through it, assuming she was just name-dropping. I hadn't realized she was constructing an entire alternate identity, with my resume as the foundation. Back in my room 2 days ago, I'd started compiling everything. Just a hunch, I told myself. But the Google Drive folder I labeled Legacy Reclaimed had grown from one PDF to a full arsenal. Email threads, internal memos, screenshots of posts and edits, NDA breach documents, backdated LinkedIn timelines. I knew tech, but what I knew better was how to cover a trail before someone tried to set it on fire. I spent the next 20 minutes in the study Soraya never used, finalizing a clean visual timeline. The pattern was irrefutable. Callista had strategically aligned herself to every part of my business's success, just far enough from the money to avoid legal implication, but deep enough into the image to look like a partner. She'd posted an article on Medium claiming to advise outdoor retail startups. My business was listed as a testimonial source, quotes pulled from internal staff bios I had written. In tech, we say if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Guess what? I document everything. I plugged in my encrypted USB. On the label, just in case. And now I had my case. The cherry on top. A Zoom recording from last month. Callista casually mentioning to a panel that she was strategically aligned with the Mountain Peak brand and that she had led internal transitions in their product fulfillment model. Every word was a lie, but the panel believed her. They let her into a pitch competition for women-led businesses using my name. I forwarded the clip to the same board member who had sent me the voice note. He replied minutes later, "She's crossed into fraud territory. You could press charges easily." My fingers hovered over the keys. "Let's not yet," I typed back. The difference between burning a bridge and letting it collapse is timing. I'd let them think I was standing still, when I was just walking around the foundation with a sledgehammer behind my back. When I rejoined the group, Soraya was making yet another toast. Her glass was raised toward Callista, her words thick with sentimentality and vintage Chardonnay. "To my daughter," she said, "who's always risen to the moment, who carries not just her own name, but ours, with dignity and grace." I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, but I didn't move. If I take her down now, I thought, they'll make me the villain. Let them toast her one more time. I wasn't here for revenge anymore. I was here for narrative correction. There's no glory in exploding a lie. There's strength in letting it collapse on its own weight. I moved to the side of the room where the event coordinator was reviewing the toast schedule on her clipboard. She barely looked up. "Can I have 5 minutes on the mic?" I asked. She nodded. "You're the major sponsor," she said, flipping the page. "That's right. I'd paid for this dinner. I'd covered the wine. I'd booked the house. My name was on every contract, every invoice. They'd used my silence to build her image. Now I'd use my voice to take it back. By the time the final tray of desserts had made its round and guests began settling back into their chairs, the air inside the house felt syrupy. Warm, but strained, like everyone was trying to pretend this Thanksgiving was still a celebration and not a stage set for tension. The lights above the dining room dimmed slightly. Someone had adjusted them, probably trying to soften the mood, and Soraya clinked her spoon against her wine glass, again. "I'd like to say a few words," she announced, voice clear, tone sweet with curated reverence. I stayed silent, sitting toward the back of the room where the original seating had placed me. I crossed my legs, adjusted my sleeves, and glanced toward the event coordinator who stood by the archway with her clipboard. She caught my eye. I gave her a slight nod. The woman blinked, hesitated, then walked over and leaned down. "You still want those 5 minutes?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. She nodded once and returned to her post, ready to cue the mic. "They thought I would speak like I've always done," I said to myself. Cautiously, politely. They forgot I knew the script better than anyone. Soraya raised her glass. "To excellence," she began. "To daughters who lead, who push forward, who take on the world without waiting for it to hand them anything." She turned, facing Callista directly. "To the daughter who never gave up." Guests clapped. A few glanced my way, just long enough to notice I hadn't moved. "And some people," Soraya added, now holding the room with a deliberate pause, "are just born with the blood of winners." I let the room settle before I stood. No hurry, just quiet intention. The coordinator handed me the mic as Soraya returned to her seat, clearly thinking the segment was done. I faced the room, shoulders relaxed, mouth set in a line that felt familiar and firm. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began. A few heads turned. Callista's smile froze, only slightly. Soraya straightened in her chair. "I know most of you think of this as a tradition," I said. "Food, family, stories we've told 1,000 times. But tonight, I'd like to add one that hasn't been told yet. At least, not truthfully." A murmur rolled through the room like a low tide coming in. "Success doesn't always post selfies," I continued. "Sometimes it just pays for the whole table and waits quietly while others raise their glasses." I saw a few eyes widen. Others looked away. I've sat quietly through a lot over the years. I watched my business, my money, my efforts be rewritten into a narrative where I barely exist, where someone else borrows my name and builds a reputation on it, where being quiet is mistaken for being irrelevant. The room stilled. In this room, people are celebrated for accomplishments they didn't earn, for stories they didn't live. But that ends tonight. Callista shifted, legs uncrossing, arms tensing. I could see her processing, trying to calculate if this was a warning or a strike. "I won't let my silence be your spotlight anymore," I said. Then I pulled out my phone, tapped twice, and walked toward the projector setup. The screen flickered on. Some people leaned forward, curious. I tapped again and played the clip. It was a video call, saved from earlier this year. The sound was clear. Callista's voice filled the room, laughing casually. "Yeah, I told them it's my sister's company. Got me into the deal. Easy. They didn't even ask for paperwork. They just liked the name drop." Gasps scattered like dropped glasses. One aunt covered her mouth. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God!" Soraya looked stunned, eyes wide, mouth half open. Callista shot up from her seat. "You recorded me?" "No," I replied evenly. "You gave yourself away. I just let the room hear it." And I walked back to my place, leaving the video to play on loop. There was no yelling, no dramatic exit. Just a room unraveling. The energy flipped. Guests who had been laughing minutes ago now looked lost, uncomfortable. Some stood up. Others looked at Soraya, who stared at the screen as if it betrayed her personally. The event coordinator froze mid-applause, eyes darting around. One aunt leaned over to her husband. "So, all of it was fake?" Callista stumbled over her words, trying to explain. "It was just, I didn't mean it like that. It was marketing language. Everyone does it." But no one interrupted her. Not this time. The power had shifted. She wasn't in control of the room anymore. And Soraya? She remained seated, still holding her glass, but no longer with any reason to raise it. I walked past both of them. Didn't look. Didn't pause. Because I didn't need applause. I had something stronger now. Proof. They crowned her with my silence. I just reclaimed my voice. The room didn't erupt. It didn't scream or gasp or scatter like I thought it might. Instead, it deflated. A collective exhale that carried the weight of shock, confusion, and something worse, recognition. The video had finished playing. No one moved. No one clapped. A spoon dropped somewhere near the dessert table, the tiny sound more jarring than the confession had been. I didn't speak. I stood near the mic for a moment longer, but I didn't need to say anything else. The silence worked better than any speech I could have prepared. It had edge, power, truth. Soraya looked around like a host scanning the room for a fire exit. Callista, Ondine, was frozen, her mouth slightly parted, eyes darting left and right like she couldn't decide which way to run. I panicked, she muttered, barely audible. It's not what it sounded like. No one responded. If shame had a sound, it would have been the breath they all held. And then Soraya, ever the strategist, stepped forward. Her voice tried to find its strength, but it cracked in places. This family, she began, lifting her glass again, though her hand trembled slightly, still has direction, and Callista will continue to lead it forward. She is, after all, the one who carries our legacy. My head tilted slightly. That hadn't been discussed with anyone. I could see the confusion ripple through the crowd. A few cousins furrowed their brows. Uncle Marty blinked, lips parted like he wanted to say something but didn't know what. A teenage cousin, Drew, spoke up. Are we just pretending that didn't happen? The room went dead again. I didn't say a word. I just looked at Soraya. And for the first time that night, she flinched. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. One subtle reaction after a lifetime of emotional stone walls. And it was enough. The spell was breaking. Whispers started in pockets. Ants clumped together like wind chimes in a storm, murmuring behind wineglasses. Uncles leaned in close, voices hushed. Kids peeked at phones, thumbs tapping faster than their parents could hush them. I heard one of the younger nephews ask another, "Did Aunt Callista really lie like that?" The other shrugged, like he wasn't ready to believe what he'd seen. I stepped into the hallway just as Aunt Cheryl caught my arm. She'd been quiet all night, sipping her rosé like it had answers at the bottom of the glass. "We didn't know," she said, voice soft. "We just believed what we were told." I nodded once. Most people do. She looked down, guilt blooming in her eyes. "I'm sorry." "I'm sure you are," I said, gently. But apologies after the reveal aren't healing, they're housekeeping. Her lips parted to say more, but I didn't wait. I turned and walked out to the patio. The cold didn't sting this time. A few minutes later, Callista came out, closing the door behind her like she was stepping into confession. "I panicked," she started again, as if the repetition made it more believable. "I didn't think you'd come this year. I never thought you'd actually—" "Expose you?" I finished for her. She went silent. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she added. "But you did. Over and over," I said, voice calm. "And you liked it. I was just tired of being invisible. When I used your name, people noticed me. They listened." "They listened," I said, "because you were standing on something real. You wore what I bled for like it was a borrowed gown." She wiped her eyes. I didn't comfort her. "You want sympathy now?" I asked. "After you built a platform with my credentials and stood on it like it was earned?" "It didn't feel like stealing," she whispered. "That's the problem," I said. "It never does when the applause is loud enough." I stepped past her, headed for the door, but paused. "Return it," I said without looking back. "Return what?" "My name." Inside, Soraya sat alone at the head of the table, the same chair where she had lifted so many toasts, delivered so many grand declarations. Now she was quiet, not dignified, just small. Her hands folded, her wineglass untouched. She didn't look at anyone, didn't speak. I walked past her. For a moment, I considered saying something, one final remark, something sharp enough to scar, but I didn't. She built a kingdom on make-believe. All I did was stop pretending. As I reached for my coat and bag, I glanced toward the gallery wall, the one lined with family photos spanning generations. My face was still missing. It wasn't a surprise, it was tradition. But this time, I didn't ache over it. This time, I didn't wonder if I should have tried harder. This time, I smiled, because they never gave me a place in this family. But I built something stronger, myself. Let them keep the crown. I'll take back the truth. I sat in my home office, the morning light leaking through the blinds, casting quiet lines of gold across my desk. A mug of coffee, still steaming, rested in my hands, but I hadn't taken a sip yet. It had been a full week since the dinner. The kind of dinner that doesn't just end with dessert, but with silence, rupture, and the slow rebuilding of self. No calls, no texts, not from Soraya, not from Ondine, and I was okay with that. What wasn't quiet, however, was my inbox. It was flooded. Messages from people who had been at that table, or who had only heard about it. Distant cousins, old family friends, even my high school English teacher. Some commended me for finally standing up. Others apologized for their silence or for never noticing. One email simply read, "The way you stood there and said what you said, I've never seen anyone in this family do that." I didn't reply to most. I didn't need to, but I didn't delete them either. Each one was a marker, a sign that something had shifted. Soraya's and Ondine's silence wasn't cruel. It was confirmation, a boundary being drawn, a door closing without slamming. It's always quiet after the glass shatters, I thought, but you can still hear how people step over the pieces. 2 nights ago, while working late, I checked my social feeds. A post from Ondine, timestamped 48 hours back, popped up. "Family, the ones who lift you up no matter what. Grateful for all of it. Blessed # legacy." The photo was one I knew, a Christmas gathering from a few years ago. Carefully cropped, well lit, curated with care. And, like clockwork, I wasn't in it. This wasn't new. She'd been erasing me for years. But this time, the comments didn't play along. "Didn't you just get exposed? Wait, didn't you lie on your brand pitch? Why isn't your sister ever in any of these photos?" Ondine replied in her usual gentle tone. "Families are complicated. Social media doesn't tell the whole story." But the shift was unmistakable. The mask was slipping. "She tried to hold on to the fantasy after the credits had rolled," I whispered to myself, but the audience had already left the theater. The next morning, I got an email from Marlene, an old industry contact. She had forwarded me a conversation thread between Ondine and one of her beauty brand partners. The brand was ending their collaboration. Value misalignment and lack of transparency were the official reasons. An hour later, Amanda texted me. She worked in HR for a retail chain Ondine had recently partnered with. They're rechecking her resume. Something about falsified job titles. Before I could respond, another message came in. A screenshot from a private Facebook group. Someone asked, "Didn't she say she was VP of marketing at your firm?" I typed back simply, "That role doesn't exist. She's never worked here." No drama, no flair, just truth. Truth doesn't have a PR team, but it always gets the last say. That night, as I was packing up some proposals for the week ahead, a new email dropped into my inbox. Ondine. The subject line, "Please." It wasn't short. "I didn't know how to stop," she wrote. "Every time I told the truth, no one noticed me. But when I borrowed your shine, suddenly the room lit up. I just wanted to feel like I mattered." She asked me to help. "Just a few public words," she said, "just enough to clear the air. Tell them I'm not a fraud, that it was a misunderstanding. Please." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what needed to be said. I replied with 2 lines. "You didn't borrow it, you forged it. Now live with the shadow." Then I blocked her email address. The next morning, I updated my company bio. Founder, CEO, and unapologetically invisible no more. They used to say I didn't belong at the table, so I built my own and invited only the honest. Later that afternoon, I finalized the outline for a new community scholarship fund named after my grandmother, the woman who raised me on truth, not polish. the woman who never needed a spotlight to make a legacy. Just as I was closing my laptop, my phone rang. This is Cassidy from the podcast Truth Threads. We want to feature your story, unfiltered, your version. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the branches outside, leaves still clinging even though the season had already turned. I'll do it, I said calmly. But only on one condition. Name it. I'm not here to tear anyone down. I just want to tell the truth. There was a pause on the other end. Then, fair enough. I ended the call, set the phone down, and exhaled. Turns out, being invisible was just my cover. Now, I get to choose who sees me. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the quiet. Not the strained silence of tension held too long, but a kind of honest stillness. Soft bird song drifted through the slightly open window. The chill in the Oregon morning pressed against my cheeks, but I didn't mind. I had slept through the night, not restlessly, not haunted by unfinished conversations, just deeply. As I slid my feet into slippers and walked toward the kitchen, I felt it. A strange lightness. Not the kind that makes you feel euphoric, but the kind that comes after you've let go of something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying. I brewed my coffee slowly. I didn't rush. I watched the steam swirl up in the early sun as I leaned against the counter. My laptop waited on the dining table, Monday's operations schedule open, unread. But I wasn't anxious about it. Work would get done. It always did. There was a time when being home felt like retreating, like I'd failed to find a place at the bigger table. Not anymore. When you stop asking for a seat at the wrong table, you realize your own home was always waiting. I opened my inbox just before 9. Most messages were routine, but tucked between them were a few that made me pause. A text from Jordan, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. Just wanted to say, thank you for saying what none of us could. You said it with grace and guts. A scanned letter arrived from Aunt Leona. Her handwriting was instantly familiar, elegant cursive, a little shaky now. Your grandmother would have been proud. I'm sorry for staying quiet when I should have stood beside you. I didn't expect it to hit me the way it did. Not the apology, but the fact that she remembered Grandma, remembered how she raised me on straight lines and hard truths. The memory of lavender oil and cornbread and warm, steady eyes. I hadn't realized how much I missed that kind of loyalty. Later, a name popped up I hadn't seen since my early consulting days. Miriam, a former colleague. She'd seen the video clip floating around online. All I can say is, damn, that was long overdue. Proud of you. Justice doesn't always come with press conferences or slammed gavels. Sometimes it shows up in the silence of people who once dismissed you, now listening. Sometimes it's an email with no ask, just acknowledgement. Or a message that doesn't begin with I didn't know, but I see it now. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped rebuilding the ones they kept knocking down. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Hello? There was a pause. Then, a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. It's me, Soraya said. I didn't speak right away. She didn't sound like herself, not cold, not collected, just tired, worn. I didn't think you'd pick up, she added. Neither did I replied, settling into the chair by the window. She exhaled. Your father, he wouldn't have liked any of this. I let that hang for a second, then answered. Then maybe he should have built something stronger than silence. Another pause. But she didn't fight me on it. For once. I've been thinking a lot, she said. About the choices I made. About what we allowed to happen. And I know now. You didn't walk away from the family. We walked away from you. I didn't cry. There was no sting in my chest, no urge to lash back. I just nodded to myself and whispered, thank you for saying that. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But something shifted, a mutual understanding, like two people finally agreeing that the house had burned down and neither of us had water to stop it. I won't keep you, she said. "Just wanted you to know." And she hung up. I stared out the window for a while, watching the wind pull the last leaves from the trees. There was a quiet compassion in me for her, but also a boundary, firm, clear, and unshakable. That evening, I received one final message from Ondine. Email subject: "No more excuses." "I won't ask you to fix what I broke," she wrote. "I've lost most of my partnerships. I've stepped away from my channels. I'm taking time off, maybe for good." She didn't plead this time. She didn't perform. "I never doubted you," the message ended. "I just hated that others believed you before they believed me." I closed the laptop. No reply necessary. There was nothing left to say. And somehow, that felt like the right ending. The next morning, I took a slow walk around the edges of my property, a ritual I'd ignored for too long. The fence line was solid, the path uneven, dotted with pine needles. I paused by the garden patch, the one Grandma had told me to start years ago. Lavender still grew there, faint but resilient. I remembered planting those seeds alone, the summer I left for good. No fanfare, no grand announcement, just soil, sunlight, and silence. "People always say family is everything," I whispered, "but sometimes protecting yourself is." Forgiveness isn't always about reunion. Sometimes it's just permission to leave with your dignity. As dusk settled in, I returned inside, made tea, lit a candle. There was something about the quiet tonight that felt complete, not empty. I sat at my writing desk, a real pen, thick paper, and I began. "Dear Soraya, this isn't a peace treaty. It's a declaration of self. I won't come back, but I won't carry the weight anymore either." I folded the letter, slipped it into a drawer, not to mail, just to mark the moment, just to let go. You don't need closure from those who close the door on you. You just need the strength to stop knocking. And for the first time in years, I slept without rewriting the story in my dreams. The elevator ride up to the podcast studio was smoother than I expected. No creaks, no buzz of nervous energy, just a soft instrumental hum playing overhead. I adjusted my blazer slightly and glanced at the reflection in the mirrored walls. Calm, composed. No trace of the girl who used to shrink at the sound of her own name in family gatherings. The studio was on the 9th floor of a clean glass front building in downtown Portland. It smelled like new leather and eucalyptus oil, a strange but calming combination. Cassidy, the host, greeted me at the door with a wide smile. Not performative, not forced, just human. "You're the most requested guest we've had all year," she said as she guided me toward the recording space. Everything was sleek. Crisp lines, black sound panels, matte microphones set like intentioned punctuation marks across the table. It looked nothing like my childhood home, and I was grateful for that. No lace doilies. No passive-aggressive photo arrangements, just presence. I sat down across from her, took a breath, and wrapped the headphones over my ears. The sound of my own breath amplified in the booth. Steady, even. I used to fight for space at their table. Today, I sit at mine, and it has microphones. Cassidy gave a small nod, then pressed a button. "We're rolling." "So," she began, "for those who might be unfamiliar with your story, where did it all start?" I didn't flinch. I didn't stutter. I began, not from pain, but from precision. "It started with absence," I said. "Not just physical, but deliberate. My face missing from the family photo wall, over and over, until even I began to wonder if I'd imagined my place there." I told her about the fake award Ondine once accepted on my behalf, her name stitched where mine should have been, about the dinners where I was introduced as the cousin who lived far away, even when I was sitting right there. I described the night everything changed. That Thanksgiving dinner, where I put the truth on the table and left the lies scattered like broken silverware. Cassidy didn't interrupt. She let me build the narrative brick by brick. With each account, I matched it with reality. Timelines, screenshots, contracts, receipts. Because truth, when it's documented, becomes undeniable. I ended with a line I hadn't practiced but knew by heart. It's not about revenge, it's about reclaiming the story before someone else finishes the last page for you. Cassidy leaned in slightly. That's powerful. I nodded. Power isn't always taken with fists. Sometimes it's claimed with facts. 3 days later, the episode went live, and then the world answered. It wasn't viral in the way most things are. No memes, no mockery. It moved like a slow-burning fuse, steady, intentional, unforgettable. Comment after comment poured in. I was the invisible daughter, too. She gave a voice to everything I was never allowed to say at the dinner table. I didn't even know I needed to hear this, until I did. An op-ed ran in a national magazine, the woman who walked away from her family, not her worth. A journalist even tagged me, calling it a quiet revolution in narrative ownership. Then came the email that made me blink twice. A major publisher. Your voice has power. Let's put it in hardcover. I read it 3 times before responding. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just closed my laptop and sat in silence for a moment. Not overwhelmed, just rooted. The following morning, a former coworker sent me screenshots. Ondine's world was unraveling. Her sponsors were out, all of them. Public statements about realignment of values and ethical vetting. Influencer blogs speculated about her sudden disappearance. Followers questioned past claims, old stories, the neatly curated illusion. And then, just like that, all her social accounts vanished. No goodbye, no farewell post, just silence. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in someone else's collapse. Only clarity. She wanted the world to see her as me. Now she sees what it costs to lie about someone else's climb. That Friday, I hosted a dinner. Not Thanksgiving. Not a replacement. Just a gathering of my choosing. My team, scholarship students, my best friend Camille, all seated around a long wooden table in my home, under soft pendant lights. On the table, no heirloom bracelet, no curated toasts, just home-cooked dishes and shared stories. At the center of the table was a framed photo, me and Grandma, in our aprons, laughing over a burnt pie crust in that tiny Oregon kitchen. Before we ate, I handed out handwritten notes to each guest. You matter. No permission required. Nobody cried. But Camille did take my hand under the table and squeeze it once. You did this, she whispered. You rebuilt what they tried to erase. I smiled. No, I said. I built what they never bothered to imagine. You don't have to forgive to be free. You just have to stop shrinking to fit places that never saw you. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the dishes were done, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold, but clean. The sky was wide open, stars scattered like punctuation marks over my chapter's final paragraph. I pulled my coat tighter and looked up, whispering words I hadn't dared say out loud before. They had a family legacy. I built a personal legend. And I meant it. Turns out, I didn't lose a family. I found the one I chose.